Awesome. Okay, so hello everyone. I'm Liam from Cloudcannon. If you don't know what Cloudcannon is, we are a Git-based content management system for static sites. And one of the other things we do is build a range of open source tools for the community and for the static site ecosystem. And today, the tool that I'm here to discuss is Pagefind. And specifically, Pagefind in the context of Eleventy, and Pagefind in the context of what I called in the title rich content. And by that, I generally just mean a range of sites that we find are difficult with other methods to attach search to for a range of reasons. To demo all of this, I've got this site put together. Last year, we had a great series on our blog called SSGs Through the Ages. That was sort of a wrap up of the journey of static sites. I've sort of extracted that content out and put it in this site that we can use for testing. And if we check out the timeline, we've just got this listing of errors here, and nearly every SSG and each one of these has its own page. Of course, we have Eleventy and the Eleventy page. And the way I've built this site is very much in a way that can be challenging to search sometimes. So to show that, I'll sort of run through the way the site is built first. So if we were to go and edit, let's say, that home timeline page, this is built out of Markdown with shortcodes. This is quite nice for that sort of page because it means we can come in and add text anywhere we want. We can move around where all of our listings are. If we check out the source of this page, you can see that these are just, a block that lists out all SSGs in an era and a heading for every SSG. And we've got some shortcodes for images. In fact, if we check out the Eleventy page, you'll see again text with sort of shortcodes and also a big lead-in section in the front matter. And all of this is sort of combined to produce this output page that ultimately we want to search. So in terms of other ways you might add search to this page, one common way that you might be looking to add search to a static site is with one of the front-end search tools like Lunar or any of those other sort of JavaScript-based create a file and index my site front-end search tools. And one of the struggles, especially with a page like this, is how you get, say, the text out of shortcode and things from the front matter in a nice maintainable way as sites grow. I'll hop over to code just so we've got it a little bit larger. And if we pull up the Eleventy file, then you can sort of see a little bit better here what I'm talking about, where we might want things out of shortcodes, we might have content generated by our layout. And if we think of the way that this page or this site would normally be indexed, we're looking at sort of something like this, where you have a page on your site that generates a JSON file, and then we use that JSON file to pump into some tool and search. And to do that, we iterate through our content and put in various things that we know we want to search, and then we write some plugin somewhere that reads our Markdown and converts it or strips things out and then tries to create this searchable representation of the page. And if we have more front matter, we need to add it in here, and this file grows and grows and grows, which sometimes I have issues with. It's difficult often to get all of the content you want and not the content you don't want. And also it's harder to maintain going forward. I often feel like we sort of have this whole representation in Eleventy of how to take our content and output this nice format, which is a website, and then having to do that job a second time for a JSON file feels like duplicated work. And again, can also just be very tricky. The other option is something that crawls our website, like Algolia or any hosted search, and those also work well, but then you've got to think about having an external provider, A, paying for it, and B, just thinking about it. And then it gets harder to work in with Git workflows. If you create a staging site or a short-lived branch of your website, how do you index that whole thing into an external provider such that you can search it, or do you just forego that and only have search on your main site? Is search instantly up to date when you've rebuilt your site and edited content, etc., etc.? So we quite like the local search method, and Pagefind specifically tries to somewhat bridge between the two. So it is mainly a site crawler, but it runs locally and outputs a local search index that also is very, very light on bandwidth. So you lose the main drawback of client-side search, which is this giant index that you have to load up front. So to demo this, we'll add Pagefind to the site. The site doesn't currently have Pagefind, and thankfully, that will be very quick. So if I pull up the Pagefind documentation, we'll just run through the getting started. And step one is to add the UI that we'll search with. We come in here, we'll just add this to, we'll add this straight to the timeline page just for the demo. Sorry, not the timeline page, it's the index page. And we'll put that there. Now in here, we've got a style sheet and a script. Ideally, we'd go put these in our layout and a head and be nice. For this, I'll just drop them in this Markdown file. We then have an element that will be our search, and then some JavaScript to initialize that. And that's all the changes we make to our site to start with. Of course, this isn't enough to search a site. This won't do anything right now. But if we hop to our terminal here, if we run npx 11t and build our site, or I'll do a run build because I think there's some sass in here, then we now have our underscore site directory full of our static files, as you expect with 11t. And now we run another command, which is npx pagefind, and we tell it to index that underscore site directory. And now we are done. We have search on our site. I often like to demo hosting this directory with anything else to show that there isn't any magic or shenanigans going on. So we'll just spin up a Python web server on this folder so you can know that it's truly static. If we open that, you'll see that we now have a search box on our homepage. Styling could do some work. That's somewhat unrelated. And if we search for 11t, we now get search results automatically. And that's often enough for many sites. And Pagefind's fairly smart about the way it indexes. So it knows that, say, the footer isn't relevant or a navigation isn't relevant, and it'll skip those, and it sort of steps in and out of what things make sense and indexes just the body. But there are some things that, of course, we'll want to customize, and that's where we get into the rich content. When it comes to most rich content, we're actually already done, because the content at some point will wind up on the page and thus will be indexed automatically. So for example, this is the lead-in that I was talking about, where we have this front matter of the page that ultimately gets used by the layout and output separately from our main content and everything, and we don't have to think about that since it wound up on the page. It was here, it got indexed, it's searchable. An example of something that isn't yet searchable that we might want is, say we want to search for Jerry. We don't get any results for Jerry, and that's a shame, because Jerry is the one who drew that lovely possum art that is above me and also on the 11t page. And the reason we're not getting that is it's tucked into an image alt attribute there, and that seems kind of tricky to deal with. If we were indexing our source content, we'd have to dig into this shortcode and pull it out here. And if we're crawling our site, then we'd need to configure some crawler to also index this. Always, sometimes, it's hard to say. And this is where Pagefind, the way Pagefind works sort of comes into play. So I'll first jump over to the image shortcode here. It's in our shortcodes file, and we can see we're just outputting an image tag here. Now to index that, we just drop a Pagefind attribute on it, and I'll go to the dots for that in customizing the index. And you can see here, there's a tag that you can add to things that index an attribute. And so if we were to come here and put that and just say, add the alt text of this image to the index as we're processing through it, we can now run the Eleventy build, and we can run Pagefind now with the serve flag so that it's quicker. But this is still just a static web server. When we open that, we can now search for Jerry, and we can see there's the alt text of the image blended into the content. That was very easy to add, and somewhat importantly, it's not necessarily done for all images on our website. And this is where the style of the way Pagefind's configuration works is important, and it's something I haven't really pinned a term down to. Potentially bottom-up configuration is a good way to describe it, or somewhat inverting the way things are configured, where instead of having one configuration that sits above your whole site and says, this is the way you index my site and my collections and my pages and my tags, your individual elements themselves can say whether or not I should be indexed. And that can often make a lot of sense with very component-based websites, which is something that we do a lot of experimentation and building out for, where you're building some self-contained component, a block that might be added to a page. It's really nice to, within the context of that block, say, I know this should be indexed, I know this shouldn't be indexed. For an example of something that shouldn't be indexed, say we search and want to find all SSGs that were released in the month of April, then we'll have them all here, and also we will have our main SSG timeline page, because if we look at our timeline page, it's got the dates in all of these sections. If we just specifically don't want to index those, we can do so. If we were to pull up our include that renders that little bit of the page, we can just grab that element, put a data Pagefind ignore on it, do our favorite duo of commands, which is build a new static site, index our static site for search again. Now, if we go to our home page and search April, that SSG listing page is no longer there because we've ignored just that specific tag. And that's sort of the wrap of exactly how Pagefind is great for rich content. It's an intentionally simple site to try to convey the concept, and it's an intentionally simple concept because Pagefind tries to just work very smoothly out of the box. I will quickly show a couple of exciting upcoming features for Pagefind, because that's always fun. We've got a 1.0 coming out in the order of weeks, which is quite exciting. It contains some cool features. And to show that, one feature that we've got is configurable weighting, which is really nice. So say we search for the word flexible, and we see that next is first and Eleventy is second, and this is an Eleventy call, Eleventy is pretty flexible, Eleventy should probably be at the top. How do we do that? And one of the nicest ways to do that is that we can weight things higher or lower on a page. So in this case, one nice way to do that would be, say the first section of the page probably quite important, often has very good keywords in it. So we'll just wrap that in some element that ultimately winds up on our site. And we will say that everything in this is double the weight of the rest of the page. And this works very well in our case because I know we use the word flexible, there we go, in this section. So now that one instance of the word flexible is double any other instance of the word flexible. And hopefully next is further down, we'll see. So if I come here, run my build, of course, and this time run Pagefind with the alpha release, and serve it, then we should reload, search for flexible, and now 11t is in its rightful place at the top because of that weighted content. It also now automatically weights headings 1 through 6 higher than body text, and there's some other smart stuff that it can do out of the box to really increase your relevancy, which is another hard thing often to do with some Markdown processing static site search, where your headings might be output by your layouts rather than directly from the Markdown and that sort of thing. The one last thing I'll show is the new sub-results that are coming. And this one is great, especially if you imagine on this timeline page, if this static site didn't have, where'd that go? Mystery. If we search for 11t. If the site didn't have these subpages, one per SSG, say it was just a one-page timeline that listed everything with headings for each one, how do we search that? Well, ideally we can jump down to a certain section of the page. And that's something that Pagefind will now just do out of the box for you in the 1.0 release or the current alpha. So if we it's not yet supported in the UI, it will be for 1.0. For now, I'll show you the JavaScript API for Pagefind, and we'll see if I remember it all. So we import Pagefind, JavaScript, and we be smarter about it by awaiting that. And then we search for something. Let's search for something that will be very heavily on this page. And we'll search for the term open source. And we'll see that we've got 5 results here. And then we'll try find the result that is this page. Zero data. This is probably a nice moment to talk about the way Pagefind is structured internally, where it shards the index and sort of loads just individual parts as you search. And then it also stores the rich data separately, such that when we come to load a result, we only do that network request as we need to. And that's the reason even testing on searching the entirety of MDN, which I have done before and works with Pagefind, that search query for a single word comes back under 300 kilobytes for the whole search, including giving you the results, which is quite remarkable for something without a backend. So if we check out this and type things correctly, then we get our results, and I'll just pick through these. There we go. So we have our timeline, and we can see there is a search result for this page itself. If I were to come in here and store that, what we also now have on this object is a key called subresults. And if we look into that, we can see that there is one result for every section of the page below a heading with an ID that matched our search result. And they each get their own excerpt and content generated. They've got an automatic URL with a heading here. And so with this, you could sort of, currently I've got IDs on all of the eras. So this would jump to each era on this page that has the content that matches what I'm searching for. So this will be great for documentation sites and a lot of those sites where big long pages with lots of headings and you want to be able to jump down to them. And yeah, the default UIs in Pagefind will support that for 1.0 automatically under some option, which will be lovely. Of course, there's a lot of other features of Pagefind, a lot of things I haven't covered, but the main thing I wanted to sort of discuss today was just the style of inverting the way things are configured and things are controlled such that each component can bubble that up rather than having to do it top down. For one last quick example, I'll lift a little veil here and show editing a page on Cloud Cannon's marketing site, which is conveniently in 11t. And for this, we've taken components really to the extreme. How far can we go with components? How far can we go with a component builder? And as a result now, we can come in here, we can choose to add components to the page. It's a very page buildery experience. And we could come in here and say, you know, we want to add this little emoji heading. And we can come in here and add that and add some wave emoji. And indexing this for search through any other local method seems very daunting. If we look at the source structure of this page, you'll see that it's all Markdown nested. If we search for my heading, you know, this is content blocks, sum array index, dot this, dot this, dot this, dot this. Any iteration over our source content to reliably get out this exactly what we do and don't want to be indexed is somewhat impossible in this structure. And this is an extreme of this structure. How far can we go with components? But it is very relevant. And I got locked out of Cloud Cannon, so that's fine. But that's the gist. I think that's everything I wanted to cover. I'm more than happy to answer any questions or queries or any other little things that people want to poke around on. The site, I'll commit this change to the search. It's available on the very apt beigeopossum.cloudvent.net. And I think that's everything from me for now.
I kind of typed a question and I think you answered it a few minutes after I typed it, but does Pagefind inject elements with an ID into the page in order to support that jumping to the right context? I think you actually answered it though. You said you had IDs on several of the elements in the eras, so it uses existing IDs.
It uses existing IDs, so it relies on you putting IDs on headings. It does also mean that it does give you the data to jump to any IDs. So it does it by headings automatically, but you could put IDs on divs and put IDs on anything, and it will actually return all of that information with your search result if you want to.
Oh, that'll be in the search results. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, Pagefind, part of the reason why it runs so quick, which is generally faster than your SSG, is that it tries to not edit any pages, just for performance reasons, because it's a lot faster if we just look at them and output other stuff.
So I'm curious, how stable is the current alpha?
The current alpha actually currently has 0 breaking changes and is very stable. It is what is powering the Cloud Cannon site. We go to our marketing site, we can open up this modal, we can search for something, and this is all running on the Pagefind alpha. There are a couple slight configuration changes that will happen before 1.0, but that will also be backwards compatible. So the goal is that the 1.0 release, if you're already using Pagefind, you can upgrade completely silently and change config if you want to. But in terms of stability, completely stable, nothing core has changed. It's mostly new features.
Very cool. And you said that the sub results are not integrated into the UI quite, is it? The default UI yet? Is that correct?
Correct. Not yet. So they're only through the JavaScript API. But on my timeline of getting 1.0 out in a few weeks, I will have to tackle that very soon. So the default UI will get them probably as an opt-in. And then the other thing that's coming up soon is what's used here, which is the Pagefind modular UI. This one it's available now. This one's less stable, more experimental in terms of it will change, but in this one you can put, so this is an input, this is a filter component, this is a result list. They're all separate components that you can add to the page in different places and sort of build your own search UI as you want to.
Very cool. Okay, great. Thank you for your work on this. I enjoyed the heck out of what I've used of it so far. So thank you.
That's awesome to hear. I haven't been checking chat, so if there are any chat questions.
I love that it's free. I was waiting for a pricing.
No, sorry, I should have covered that up front. Free,
MIT, I'm looking at the GitHub right now.
MIT, yep. If you have any issues or any feedback on it, of course, the GitHub issues are a great place to interact. If you want to contribute, all of those things, and pagefind.app for the documentation.
I like messing with stuff. I like looking through code. I get myself in trouble sometimes. So I love to be able to look at the code and say, oh, that's how it does it, that kind of stuff.
Awesome. Zach posted a good demo as well, which is his Twitter archive with Pagefind. Another great example of Pagefind at scale, which is where you can search through 46,000 tweets in what feels like a instant amount of time. And that's pretty cool.
Here comes Elon with his lawyers.
Awesome. Well, I think that's it for me. Obviously, if there are any more questions, just jump into our GitHub, drop a discussion or an issue or anything. Happy to talk more there. Yeah. Lovely to talk.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much.